Hello everyone. Welcome to the Narrativas channel. Today, we will embark together on the first chapter of the amazing story of Tommy, the Dreamy Astronaut. I hope you have fun and join us on this and other exciting journeys. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any episodes. Let's get started. Tommy Taylor was a dreamy 13-year-old boy who lived in a small town in the United States in the 1950s. Tommy's family had always lived in New Jersey, where his paternal grandparents had built the house many years ago. Tommy's father was an only child, and after his grandparents passed away, he inherited the house and moved in with his wife and children. The house was located in a quiet neighborhood of the town and had a large backyard where Tommy and his sister used to play. The house was made of wood and had a classic and well-preserved style, with antique furniture and decor that harkened back to the past. It was a place full of memories and family stories, and Tommy loved spending time there with his sister and parents. One day, while coming back from school, Tommy found an abandoned cat on the street. He brought the cat home and decided to adopt it as his pet. The cat was small and white, with black spots on its back. Tommy named him Sneeze, as he always made a funny sound when he purred. From a young age, he had a big dream to be an astronaut. Tommy loved looking up at the sky and imagining all the adventures he could have in space. He spent hours reading books about astronauts and watching science fiction movies. In the 1950s, there was a competition between the United States and the Soviet Union that began shortly after World War II, when the U.S. launched Project Paperclip to recruit German scientists, including Wernher von Braun, who would become the main architect of the American space program. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union was also developing its own space program, led by Sergei Korolev. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite in history, which caused a great impact and shocked the Americans. Shortly thereafter, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 2, with the dog Lake on board, which became the first living being to orbit the Earth. These events led the U.S. to increase its investments in space technology and to accelerate its space program, which in 1958 launched the American Space Agency. The space race between the United States and the Soviet Union in the 1950s was marked by a lot of rivalry and competition, but also by important scientific and technological advances. The two nations invested billions of dollars in research and development, with the goal of becoming leaders in space exploration and, consequently, in world geopolitics. Tommy was fascinated by the space race and sought information in every possible way. As he didn't have money to buy newspapers, he would go to newsstands and spend hours reading headlines and information about NASA's advances and the Russians' achievements in space. Tommy learned to read very early, thanks to his mother's dedication, and with that, he acquired excellent reading skills. He liked to discover the meaning of words he didn't know and tried hard to understand the entire context. This helped him better understand the information about the space race and fuel his passion for space even more. Even without having money to buy newspapers, Tommy never stopped seeking knowledge, and his goal was always to learn more and more, which was his dream. However, Tommy's family reality was very different from his dream. His mother, Mary, worked as a seamstress and his father, Paul, was a carpenter. Money was tight and the idea of paying for an astronomy college was impossible. Tommy felt discouraged and sad, as it seemed that his dream would never come true. Mary Taylor, Tommy's mother, worked from home. She sewed clothes for people in town, often staying up late at night to finish an order on time. She also sewed clothes for her children, often improvising with scraps of fabric she obtained from friends and neighbors or from leftovers from her clients. Mary knew things were tough for the family, but she never let that stop her from giving love and attention to her children. She was a caring mother and always found creative ways to make life a little easier for her family. Paul Taylor, Tommy's father, was a carpenter and worked in a small workshop in the back of his house. He made furniture and did repairs for people in town, often working long hours to meet customers' demands. Paul was a man of few words, but was very skilled in his work. He used his skill to help support the family, but also to create furniture and toys for his children. Tommy was proud of the furniture his father made and the toys he created, and always asked him to teach him how to make something. Paul was a dedicated father and did everything he could to ensure that his family had enough. Liz was Tommy's younger sister, a 5-year-old girl who loved to follow her brother on all his adventures. Even though she was very young, she already had an unconditional love for her brother and always wanted to be by his side. When Tommy went to Liz's room, she was very happy and felt important for being there. Liz attended kindergarten and loved to take Tommy's used notebooks with her, even though she didn't understand anything written in them. For her, the important thing was to have something that belonged to her brother and that she could show to her classmates at school. When Tommy came home and found out that Liz had taken his notebooks, he didn't mind. He was just happy to see his sister's joy. Liz's favorite activity was taking a bath and splashing around. She loved feeling the water run down her body and made sure to get everything around her wet, driving her mother crazy. Another thing Liz loved to do was to brush Tommy's cat. She thought he looked more beautiful with his fur all tidy and loved taking care of him. Even without understanding anything about Tommy's dream of being an astronaut, Liz admired her brother very much. She saw his excitement when talking about space and was enchanted by the stories he told. Liz had no idea what NASA was or how a rocket worked, but she knew it was important to her brother, and that was enough for her to admire him even more. Tommy loved going to his little sister Liz's room. Although she was still too young to understand his love for space and the unknown, Tommy thought she enjoyed looking at the stars with him. In fact, he believed that with every time she looked at the night sky, Liz felt a little of what he felt. Tommy and Liz would climb up to the roof of the house together, carefully making their way up from the balcony of Liz's room. Tommy taught his little sister how to move safely, despite her fear of heights. They would lie down on the roof, gazing at the shimmering stars. The cold night air made them shiver, but they didn't mind, so fascinated were they with the beauty of the universe. Tommy tried to explain everything to Liz, but often he got lost in his own thoughts. Nevertheless, he enjoyed talking about the moon, the stars, and how they could one day visit those places. He dreamed of the possibility of becoming an astronaut and traveling through space, taking his sister with him. Liz, on the other hand, could barely keep up with the conversation. She would ask innocent questions like, "Where's the moon?" or "Why do the stars shine?" Tommy would laugh and try to explain everything in the simplest way possible. He loved her innocence and the way she made him feel important for being her older brother and able to answer her questions. They spent hours on the roof of the house until their mother appeared and made them come down. Liz would whine and cry, wanting to stay a little longer, but Tommy knew they had to come down. He promised his little sister they would come back the next night, which made her excited and happy. Those nights on the balcony and on the roof were the happiest moments for Tommy. He felt free, exploring a universe of possibilities, while sharing those moments with his sister. He knew that despite their financial difficulties, he had something that money couldn't buy: the love of his family. At school, Tommy also had a secret admiration for Lucy, a beautiful and popular girl. He never had the courage to talk to her, but he was happy when she smiled at him in the hallway. Lucy was truly a very beautiful girl, with long blonde hair and bright green eyes. She was popular at school and was known for her friendliness and kindness to everyone. Despite having a more financially comfortable life, she was not snobbish and always treated everyone with respect and kindness. Her father owned a successful hardware store in the region, and her mother was a colleague of Tommy's teacher in the same school, but in high school. The family had a new car and often traveled together. Lucy also had many qualities. She was polite, kind, and helpful. Tommy greatly admired these qualities in her, in addition to her physical beauty. Every afternoon, she passed by Tommy's house, hoping to find him. They often met and talked timidly, both blushing. Even though she was popular, Lucy had no arrogance or presumption and was very well liked by her schoolmates. At only 13 years old, she already showed a lot of maturity and kindness, something that Tommy greatly admired. Tommy's teacher, Mrs. Linda, was one of the few people at school who seemed to care about him. She was an experienced and kind teacher who understood the difficulties Tommy faced in school. She tried to help him in the best way possible, giving him extra attention and always encouraging him to participate in classroom activities. In the classroom environment, Tommy usually felt out of place. He didn't have many friends and avoided speaking in public or participating in group activities. This often made him appear uninterested or unmotivated, which led other students and even some teachers to wonder if he was a good student. But Mrs. Linda knew that there was much more to Tommy than he appeared, and therefore always encouraged his interests and dreams, like his desire to become an astronaut. When Tommy felt discouraged or was bullied, Mrs. Linda was there to support him and show him that he was valuable and important. She also tried to include Tommy in group activities with other students that she knew would be kind to him. This way, Tommy felt more included and realized that he could make friends in school. Although school was a difficult place for Tommy, the presence of Mrs. Linda was a ray of hope in his life. He felt safer and more comfortable knowing that there was at least one person who cared about him. He made an effort to show the teacher that he was a good student and was always excited when she recognized his effort and praised him. Mrs. Linda was more than a teacher to Tommy. She was a friend and an important support in his life. Furthermore, Tommy suffered from bullying from Bill and his gang at school. They called him Space Nerd and made fun of him for being shy and introverted. This caused Tommy to isolate himself even more in his imaginary world. The only person who understood Tommy's world was his cousin Ian, who lived in another city. Ian was also passionate about science fiction and loved listening to the stories Tommy created in his mind. But, because of the distance, they could only meet during vacations. One day, while Tommy was home alone, he was playing with his astronaut dolls and simulating a mission to the moon. He was so focused on his game that he didn't notice his cousin Ian had entered the house. Ian stood at the door, watching Tommy as he spoke to himself, describing every detail of his imaginary mission. Tommy didn't notice Ian's presence until he heard his cousin's voice behind him. Startled, Tommy turned around and blushed with embarrassment. He thought Ian would make fun of him, but instead, Ian asked him about his game and asked to participate. Tommy was surprised but also excited that someone finally understood his dreams. Since that day, Tommy and Ian started playing together, and Ian became a great ally to help Tommy achieve his dream of becoming an astronaut. Ian, Tommy's cousin, was originally from a small town called Maryland. Unlike Tommy, he came from a family with 6 children, and he was the 3rd oldest. At 16 years old, Ian was still in high school, but he wasn't a very dedicated student. He preferred to spend his time riding his bike and fishing in the river that ran through the town. Summer vacations were always a highly anticipated time for Ian, as he could leave behind the monotonous routine of the small town to visit his aunt and cousins in New Jersey. He was particularly close to Tommy, who was almost like a younger brother to him. Despite being 3 years younger, Tommy was much more dedicated to his studies and always spoke enthusiastically about his space adventures. He admired his cousin's creativity and imagination, who seemed to live in a world separate from the rest of the family. He saw in Tommy an above-average intelligence and a natural talent for storytelling and drawing. Ian's mother was the sister of Tommy's mother, and they shared a similar financial condition. His mother worked as a teacher in a school in the small town, while his father was a small trader. Despite the financial difficulties, Ian and his siblings never went hungry, as their mother made sure to prioritize food. Ian grew up in a simple yet welcoming environment. He learned to appreciate the simple things in life and to deal with adversity in a positive way. When he went to New Jersey to visit his aunt and cousins, Ian felt out of place in the big city, but at the same time fascinated by the possibilities it offered. He admired Tommy for having the courage to dream and try to make his dreams come true, something that Ian was still unsure if he had in himself. Despite knowing how difficult his dream was, Tommy continued to study and learn everything he could about space. His teacher, the kind Mrs. Linda, noticed his passion and always encouraged him to keep believing in himself. Linda was a strong and determined woman who fought for women's rights as early as the 1950s. She believed that all people, regardless of gender, race, or social class, had the right to be treated with respect and justice. As a mother of 2 children and a wife to a caring husband, she juggled her teaching career with her family responsibilities. Every day, Linda woke up early to prepare breakfast for her family before going to school. There, she taught classes for elementary school students, always encouraging her students to think for themselves and question what seemed unfair or wrong to them. After work, she returned home to prepare dinner and help her children with their homework. Although she was always busy, Linda was a kind and caring person who cared about her students and the community as a whole. She was one of the few people in town who believed that Tommy had great potential despite his humble financial situation, and she tried to help him whenever she could. However, she also believed that it was important for Tommy to learn to defend himself, so she did not interfere in the bullying situations he faced. Linda was also a friend of Lucy's mother and admired her strength and determination. They often talked about women's issues and how they could fight for their rights in the conservative society of the 1950s. Linda felt that Lucy was one of the few students who understood what she tried to teach in her classes and could one day follow in her footsteps in the fight for feminist ideals. Tommy used to take Aspiro with him on his imaginary space journeys, imagining the cat as a travel companion in his intergalactic adventures. Aspiro was always enthusiastic and willing to follow Tommy in his fantasies, even though he was just a cat. Aspiro was a very curious cat and used to climb on Tommy's house roof frequently, where he watched the night sky and stars alongside his owner. Tommy loved having Aspiro's company during his astronomical observations, and the cat seemed to enjoy it as much as he did. However, even though Aspiro was a beloved cat by Tommy, he became the target of the bullies who often harassed and chased the poor cat, making Tommy feel even sadder and powerless about the situation. Tommy knew he couldn't protect Aspiro all the time, but he still tried to keep him safe whenever he could. Aspiro was one of the most important things in his life, and he would do anything to protect his beloved cat. Aspiro became Tommy's great companion in his imaginary space adventures. He created stories in which he and Aspiro were brave astronauts who explored distant planets and discovered new galaxies. But Tommy's life was about to change in a way he never imagined. That same day, while shopping for some items at Mr. Tom's grocery store, he came across an exciting news in the local newspaper. The article talked about a national contest promoted by NASA to select young talents for the space program. The winner of the contest would receive a scholarship to study astronomy and fulfill their dream of becoming an astronaut. Tommy was ecstatic as he read the news. Finally, he had a real chance to fulfill his dream. But he knew it would be a tough competition. Tommy would need to work hard to stand out among the candidates. He decided that he would do everything to win the contest and make his dream of being an astronaut come true. He arrived home excited and told the news to his mother and his sister Liz. They were surprised and happy for him, but his father didn't seem as excited. Paul was worried about the expenses that the trip to the competition could bring. Tommy felt a little discouraged with his father's reaction, but he decided that he wouldn't let anything stand in the way of his dream. He spent weeks studying and preparing for the competition. His friend Aspiro was always by his side, cheering him on in his imaginary adventures. Meanwhile, Bill and his gang continued to bully Tommy at school. Bill was a boy who suffered a lot. He had repeated a grade twice, which made him older than the other students in his class. To make matters worse, his father Janata was a bitter and resentful man who blamed Bill for the death of his wife during the boy's birth. This blame transformed Bill's personality, making him aggressive and cruel towards younger children, especially at school. The lack of love and understanding in his life made Bill become a bully at school, always looking for weaker targets to intimidate and attack. He seemed to feel good about exercising this type of power over others, which made him even more feared by other students. His sad and resentful personality meant that he didn't have many friends, and his relationship with teachers and school staff was also not the best. Although he had aggressive behavior, many at school felt sorry for Bill, knowing that he was going through a tough time in his personal life. However, the fear of facing him made few dare to challenge him. Tommy was one of the few who tried to avoid Bill, but he couldn't always escape his persecutions. It was sad to see how difficult and lonely Bill's life was, but many wondered if there was any way to help him overcome his problems and find a happier path in life. One day, while Tommy was walking through the school hallway, Bill and his gang surrounded him. They began mocking him, saying things like, "Hey, astronaut, when are you gonna take off? And you'll never make it to the moon, you loser." Tommy tried to ignore them and move on, but they kept provoking him. That's when Bill took Tommy's hat and started tossing it to the other boys in the gang, laughing and taunting him. Tommy felt humiliated and powerless, not knowing what to do. He just wanted to disappear in that moment. But he didn't let the teasing affect his self-esteem anymore. Tommy realized that being different was not a bad thing and that what mattered was believing in himself. Over time, Tommy also started to talk more with Lucy. She turned out to be a nice person, and Tommy realized that she liked his imaginary stories about space. He was excited at the prospect of having a friend who understood his interests. NASA competition was approaching, and Tommy was becoming more and more determined to win. He knew it would be a great opportunity to show what he was capable of and prove to everyone that his dreams could come true. In this atmosphere of expectation and determination, Chapter 1 of Tommy's story came to an end. What does the future hold for this young dreamer? Will he win the NASA competition? Find out in the next chapter. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the Narrativas channel and turn on notifications. See you soon. Bye.